Welcome survivors, this is a video that is going to be taking us back to the island when life before cryopods was a thing. Everything's back to how it used to be. It's going to be an absolute wild ride on Ark Ascended. I'm super excited for it, and it's time to show you some of the best base locations in my opinion. Okay, so this is in like no particular order. First up is Hidden Lake. Now exact coordinates are 22.4, 69.6. Hidden Lake is like aesthetically pleasing, of course, for all those PvE builders, but honestly this can be like a decent base location for a big tribe, or even like a smaller tribe, especially if you're on a dead E server. You've got to remember, like, these caves and things like that are not going to be a thing. We're going to be building back on the surface, and it's easier to protect your dinos that are out, especially when you're breeding and stuff like that. This area is perfect for it. Resources, you're pretty close to a bunch of metal nodes. There's some metal nodes actually on the cliff sides, and beaver dams actually spawn in the lake, so getting cement and pierce is going to be no problem in this location. You've got Carno Island over there, which is great for taming. You're not too far away. It's not going to take you too long to bring your stuff over. Pretty easy to put a few towers up across those cliff areas. You've got the volcanoes and the mountains pretty close by for those big metal runs. This is a great spot, to be honest. So this one has always been a hot favorite for many years, like especially before all the caves became the main base location. And I know for sure a few people who are going to build here on launch day, so expect some traffic if you're into that early game PvP. Now I believe this actually has like 3 entrances, which you can see, and you can easily just put a few dino gates down there to stop people coming in, stop predators getting at your base. The thing you probably should watch out for is obviously people sniping your tames, but if you set up a few towers across those cliffs in decent fashion, then no reason that you can't defend this base. Next up is Herbivore Island. Everybody knows this one. Its exact coordinates is 84.3, 85.0. It is without question one of the bobbiest places on an Ark right now if you're playing Survival Evolved. But Ark Ascended, this place is going to be back to its former glory. With its position being out there in the water, pretty distant from the mainland, it's easily defendable. You have great access to all of your starter tames, from your flyers to your harvesters. It's most definitely somewhere that you could outgrow, as its biggest con is for sure the limit of endgame resources and obviously metal itself. So you are for sure going to have to do the long runs to the mountains. But if you've got a good setup and you get access to teleporters, which are apparently a lot smaller in this version of Ark, then it can for sure be a permanent base location. But for me, I think it's a great place to get started and establish yourself on whatever server that you're playing on. We actually have people still trying to build here today on our cluster just to get started, and obviously they get raided so fast. But obviously at the beginning of Ark Survival Ascended, we're going to be so limited to tech and all of the endgame tames and equipment that everybody already has and has had for a long time, or is able to get so fast. Like, we're back to the old days, which is just amazing and is definitely going to keep the longevity of the early game PvP intact. Next up, Southern Islets, 87.1, 56.9. Now this used to be a spot that people used to build on back in the day, before the caves and the cryopods. It's got a couple of good platforms that you can build a few towers on to easily defend this location. Obviously it is right on a starter spawn point, so you are for sure going to have some people come visit. You can defend it pretty well by building towers on these platforms. Obviously you'll come under threat from flyers, but like, what are people going to really have at the beginning? There's no wyverns on day one as far as I'm aware, so people are going to be building raid quetzes and probably trying to take it out from the bottom. But you can section this island off. You're going to have a few issues with obviously new survivors spawning in, but honestly, like, gunning them down is going to be relatively easy once you get set up. You are for sure going to attract attention by building in this spot, but easily defendable. You have access to all of your starter tames, early game resources, and a great spot just to get established. Next up, Green Obelisk. Exact coordinates are 59.0, 72.2. Green Obelisk is obviously a very obvious spot to build. It is by far, in my opinion, the best obelisk to build on. Being sectioned off by an island which only has one walkway to actually walk up to it, it provides a lot of natural defenses. There's only one way in and one way out of Green Obelisk if you were to walk to the center. Now obviously building at any obelisk will always come with its cons, as people are always trying to access them, especially if they're just trying to do boss fights. But taking charge of this obelisk can reap benefits in the long run. The location has a lot of access to multiple different resources that you'll need. There's a lot of metal nodes around the obelisk, It's also in a pretty central point to where the mountains are, so you can make those big metal runs pretty easy. One of the issues that you do have when building on the obelisk is trying to protect yourself from people sniping your teams in the center. If you're having a breeding base up in the middle, then you need to make sure that they're well covered so they can't be sniped from the outside, and simply just ensuring you have enough turret towers just around the obelisk itself. People will have a hard time in actually raiding you. Building something like a cage would be a good shout on this base location. You can easily defend it if you build the appropriate tower. Next up, Big Glacier. I have no idea what to call this one because I don't know what people call it these days, but its exact coordinates are 30.4, 10.0. It is one of the big glaciers that's out there in the northwest, the top corner of the map. This is probably one of my favorite locations, honestly. We built here before many years ago. It was an awesome spot. If you build it right, people are going to have a really hard time actually trying to raid you in this location. It has access to all of the end game resources. If you need polymer, crystal, metal, it's got everything you need. Obviously on official or servers where fortitude isn't significantly boosted, you are going to have to get a decent set of fur armor and wear it permanently because it is freezing up here. But it offers a couple of different pools. You have access to the ocean, so you can actually breed water teams comfortably here. And also, the underwater caves are not too far away should you want to do a drop run and get some better BPs. Also, the ice cave is pretty nearby up on the top of the mountain, so you should be able to run through there pretty easy with your tribe mates. Overall, honestly, I think this is probably one of my favorite spots on the list. I think you can actually like make a decent claim at alpha at this position, and honestly it would be somewhere I would most likely try and build on Arc Ascended on release. Next up, Swamp Island, 63.3, 53.8. This one's a funny one because somewhere I built back when we first ever played the game. There was most of the big locations were obviously taken up, especially on the official servers. Found this little swamp island. You're literally smack bang in the center of the swamp, and obviously Redwoods is right next to you, which is amazing for resources on this map. You have a lot of natural defense coming from obviously the swamp itself, and you're on an elevated platform. There's only one slope that actually walks up to it, so you can lock that off pretty tight with a decent turret tower, and with a decent build here, then you've got like a nice little base which is more difficult to raid and can get off to a good start and get established pretty decently here, because it's a nice little spot. It's one of the ones that gets kind of underlooked at times, but I've seen it work in Last Chance Saloon. It might work for you. And obviously you can probably get a few giant frogs easy, which is always amazing to help you out with that cement and paste. And obviously being so close to the swamp in the Redwoods, on your giant frog you can smash through that in no time at all. Alright, next up, Smuggler's Pass, also known as the Two Twins, at 43.5, 66.4. This is arguably the best spot on the list in my opinion. It's going to go fast, so you've obviously got the two small mountain faces there, which is pretty flat to build on. Also has a ton of metal on it. You're super close to the Redwoods anyway, and locking down those two pillars and building on top of them, I feel like that's where you want to keep your stuff. It's going to be tough to raid in the early days. Like, this is definitely a base location to keep in mind, or to try and lock down as early as possible. And you're right at the bottom of the mountain. This mountain is absolutely covered in metal nodes. This is what probably makes this spot so valuable. You have such access to resources, and also like two amazing spots that you can actually build on that are pretty flat, and you can actually cover the whole bottom area up with dino gates, and then have your two elevated tower bases on the Two Twins, which makes it just amazing for breeding. You have access to the water. In my opinion, this is easily number one. I would say that this is a high tier base location in Arc Ascended, and hopefully it stays the same. This has always been a hot property, and then people still build here today, but back in the day this was up there being number one, and a great spot for any tribe to build. Alright, next up, Swamp's Ledge, 62.6, 64.9. This can actually be a massive base location. It has multiple ledges, which usually only have one ramp accessibility, which is ideal from defending your base and stopping predators from just walking straight up to it. You have access to the swamps, the redwoods, and the mountains are pretty close by as well for those big metal runs. Once you clear a lot of the trees away, you can see that you can actually build a huge base at this spot. Obviously, some of the elevation that you get from the cliffs on this spot can give you a lot of nice natural defense when you're deciding to build your base. And then obviously for the early game, your biggest threat is really going to be flyers again. So you can build something pretty significant here and get a great start early doors on any server that you decide to play on. I would say one of its biggest cons is obviously it isn't as flat as it looks to actually build on it, but you can definitely make it work with a little bit of building skill, especially most of us have that now, and who knows what that looks like on Ark Ascended, but I'm sure we'll find that out soon enough. I think with its strategic position of it being pretty center in the map, definitely a spot to keep in mind for Ark Ascended. Alright, Redwood's Forest at 62.1, 34.2. This again is another high tier spot. It's always been a great spot to build, especially in the early days of Ark, and hopefully in Ark Ascended again. Now this spot's resource heavy, its strategic position being central of the map, right next to the swamps, and obviously bang in the middle of the redwoods. This is an ideal location, especially setting up tree platform bases. I think tree platform bases need to get some love in Ark Ascended, and I think it was always the intention originally in Ark Survival Evolved, people would actually build tree platform bases. I think obviously once you get off the ground and you're up in the trees and you've got an elevated base, with early game PvP being aerial combat and aerial raids, I think this is a great spot for you to actually set up decently, have great access to resources. Obviously cement and paste is so easy to get in the redwoods. I think a few beaver dams actually spawn in this little pool here, but also getting your giant frogs and bouncing around the redwoods, just eating up those insects, you're gonna have CP for days. But I actually love this spot. I think you can create some amazing builds here, and like I'm super excited to see what that looks like in Ark Ascended. So I think this base location could be really beneficial for you and your tribe, and again, if you build it right, then it's not going to be much of a fight, and definitely one of the top base locations on this list that you should definitely consider for you and your tribe in Ark Survival. Alright, last but not least, this one's a bit more of an honorable mention, honestly. White Sky Peak, 26.0, 14.0. This one's close to Big Glacier and a lot closer to Ice Cave. This is actually a really flat location with a fair amount of elevation. This has all of the endgame resources, and obviously so close to Blue Orb and the mountain, which has crystal, obsidian, metal, all of the things that you need to get started. Obviously you're going to need your fur. It's freezing up here as well, but it's a really nice big space that if you want to get a big base built and have access to endgame tames, I think you can really establish yourself here as a decently sized tribe. And I know anyone who's wanted to run the cave, that ice cave, which is just on the left hand side, can offer a ton of solid blueprints to get yourselves established and get some high tier gear. But again, a little bit of an honorable mention, somewhere for you and your tribe to definitely just come and take a look, consider what your options are, and potentially this could be a place for you. But you can definitely make this work and get a good foothold on the map. It's going to get busy, so there's always an opportunity for you to get established right here. Alright, props for watching this video if you made it this far, and big shout out to the AOA community who's always had my back. We will be releasing our AOA Ark Ascended cluster as soon as Nitrado drops the release, so check it out, links in the description, and hopefully we'll see you there. It is going to be a never wipe cluster, and it will never actually wipe, as we always say. But give us a like and a subscribe, and follow for any Ark Ascended content that we're going to release this year. So thanks again for watching.